And we're back on a Sunday morning at home, but not in the studio, like we never left. Welcome to the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your Sunday morning here with me in New York. But once again, we're going to skip past all that promotional jazz and get right to the guts of the episode. Well, we have a movie anniversary. It is another guilty pleasure movie, but we're not going to put that in there or put this in the guilty pleasure as part of the guilty pleasure series. This is a movie anniversary. A big legendary name from the 80s and 90s, and you still see him active on social media today, a character, and somebody who I guess didn't quite become as big a star in the United States as he could have been and probably should have been, given his kind of skill sets, his undeniable charisma, the fact that he was not afraid to poke fun at himself. It's one reason why Arnold Schwarzenegger managed to surmount the obvious obstacles of the big accent that it's not a tumor. Give these people air. Arnold was always willing to poke fun at himself. So even walking around at 260 in Commando, he didn't take himself too seriously. He was willing to be self-deprecating, be the butt of the joke. Sorry for my cat. And this actor had that in spades. 35 years ago today, on January 11th, 1991, with me having just turned 17, Jean-Claude Van Damme's Lionheart opened in theaters. Now, I did not see this movie in theaters. I'm trying to think. I don't believe that I went to the movies in that part of 1991. I did see a number of films later in 1991. At the end of the year, I saw Bugsy. Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, I saw in theaters. Terminator 2, Naked Gun 2.5, Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. So I did see a number of films, but the first Van Damme film that I saw in theaters was the following year's Universal Soldier. I don't know how that became a franchise. That film is really bad. I mean, if you just look at it as a comedy, it might work. If you just pretend that Dolph Lundgren and Jean-Claude Van Damme are making a comedy and you just go in there to laugh, the film is a riot. But they're attempting to tell a real science fiction story. It is S-H-I-T. I saw Time Cop in theaters, very good. But then I also saw the kind of key film for good and bad in Van Damme's career in theaters, which would be Sudden Death, which I will say, that is the best movie that Jean-Claude Van Damme was ever in. Best production, best filmmaker he ever worked with, in Peter Hyams, who did 2010, the year we make contact. He did The Relic, a really undersold, fantastic horror film from the 90s. Sudden Death just didn't quite do as well at the box office as it should have, and JCVD's career crested and then went down from there. But Lionheart is the kind of 90s movie. It's like set in New York City, but it's not shot there. Maybe it was shot in Toronto or Vancouver or New Mexico. Well, it wouldn't be New Mexico, but it's set in the city. And, you know, the poster, you get to have Jean-Claude looking great, you know, very fit. And you have the New York City skyline in the background. And this is something with me where I always like to see how Manhattan is represented in films over time, whether it's the 70s. You look at the way that, for example, in 1976, Marathon Man, the way New York City is represented, 3 Days of the Condor, you know, and of course, we're talking Dustin Hoffman and Robert Redford, 3 Days of the Condor, how is the city represented? Ghostbusters in the 80s, Legal Eagles, both by Ivan Reitman. How does the city look in this film? And the exteriors look fine, but there's not really that much made of it. It could have been shot. It could have been shot anywhere. There was nothing particular to New York City where it said, "Oh yeah, it had to be." They had to set it here. They could have set it in Chicago. They could have set it in L.A. They could have set it in Vancouver or Toronto or New Mexico. They could have set it anywhere. There is nothing specific. You know, in the urban jungle, there can be only one king. I mean, give me a break. I did the taglines here. I didn't see Van Damme's next film, which was Double Impact. Not good. I saw that on video. They have a concept there that's a good concept, and the film it doesn't really do anything with the concept. Two brothers, twin brothers, separated at birth. One packs a punch, one packs a piece. But then when you get into the movie and the guys meet, you can't tell who's who because both guys know how to use weapons and both guys can fight. Like, if you're going to go to the trouble of making, you understand what I'm saying? A lot of Van Damme's movies just frustrated me. And another interesting note about the era is you still had the old guard, which I would say Chuck Norris, for example. Chuck Norris is still making big action movies in that era. He had the film The Hitman in 91, which was a little bit different, than his usual fare, whether it was Code of Silence, Missing in Action, and, some of the other movies, Hero and the Terror, which was an interesting film. Chuck was kind of coming to the end as far as being a big movie star. And then he went to TV, which ended up working out great for him. Walker, Texas Ranger, and, then getting to play off of his name. But the thing is that I always felt that Van Damme had more kind of acting chops, that because he was so charismatic, that he could have done more than he was presented with. I feel like he was underutilized. They just wanted to get to, him showing off the kind of acrobatics, the fighting style that he, displayed on screen. But Steven Seagal demonstrably made better movies with less talent because he was able to, they surrounded Seagal with bigger people. And sometimes it's just a matter of who you latch onto at what point in your career. And you look at Steven Seagal, you look at the people that he worked with in his, if you want to say the word prime, Seagal worked with some really good people. And, you imagine if you kind of flipped roles, Seagal, his persona wouldn't work for a film it just wouldn't work for Lionheart. It was a different thing. The fish out of water, Van Damme with the heavy accent, all of that stuff plays into it. But man, Under Siege is as good as any movie. I don't think it's as good as Sudden Death. It's the same movie, basically. Sudden Death, Die Hard in a sports arena. Under Siege, Die Hard on a battleship, right? So if you flip roles, actually, that might be pretty interesting. If you put Steven Seagal in Sudden Death, it actually becomes more of a comedy, I would say. Imagine Steven Seagal getting in goal and then slugging the line judge. That'd been fucking great. But then you had other people in the era like Billy Blanks making these straight-to-video actioners. And then there was a guy that no one had ever heard of named Jeff Speakman who did a movie called The Perfect Weapon. And you even had Mitch Gaylord, the gymnast, doing a film called Gymkata in the 80s. It was just a strange time with a lot of different kinds of personalities that the studio system, as I always call it, tried to get to the upper echelon. Now, Seagal and Van Damme both made it to the upper echelon. I would say at his best, Seagal's, his name alone did more to open a film. And I guess despite the fact that a lot of people had issues with him and have had issues with him, he was hired for projects such as Executive Decision, where you wouldn't automatically assume, well, he's been leading all of these action movies, but we're going to put him into a really interesting supporting role and just see what happens. And in that case, he's terrific. Because, spoiler alert, his character is not the hero. You think it's going to be the hero because it's Steven Seagal in that era, but he's actually just a supporting character. And in the world of that movie, the hero is played by Kurt Russell, was just knocking out one great movie after another in the 90s. I mean, you could say that for Kurt Russell about almost every decade. But Lionheart has elements of a lot of different movies. There's elements of the buddy movie, how he shows up and then this guy decides he's going to be his manager in these sort of underground, fighting tournaments, a little bit like a Bloodsport angle, which was Van Damme's kind of entry into big studio filmmaking, if you want to call it that. I don't think Bloodsport is very good. I happen to think Kickboxer, again, if you look at Kickboxer as a comedy, the 1989 film, it's a riot. But I'm pretty sure they were trying to tell a serious story there. It's absurd. It's absurd beyond imagination. Tong Po, Eric, you can't fight this guy. He's fucking crazy. He was kicking the fucking wall. I mean, that's great stuff from the humor perspective. But we're supposed to take that seriously. Death Warrant, not good. He made a lot of films that turned profits that just weren't that good. But by the time of Lionheart, Van Damme, it was almost like he was interacting with the audience. He was winking at the audience. And he's playing the humor up in this film. He's not getting laughs because it's a fish out of water. He's generating them because he is sensing that there will be a rapport with the audience. And this is something that I believe he does really well in not so much Time Cop. That's probably the most serious film he was ever in. But in Sudden Death, there are moments in that film where he appears to be, he's playing to the audience. And he's almost reading lines for audience participation purposes. And that film has one of the great scenes in any moment in 90s cinema. There was a lot of chatter. There always is, that when parents in movies, especially in action movies, if they tell their kid, stay put, don't fucking move, you stay in your seat. Well, there's a moment in Sudden Death where Van Damme's character yells at his son, don't go anywhere, you stay right here. And 2 hours later in the movie, it's about an hour, the kid is still sitting there. That was great. I mean, that got a huge laugh when the audience realized, that son of a bitch, the kid was told to sit there. And what a concept. He listened to his old man. Unbelievable. Yeah, it's real old-fashioned, right? But Lionheart has a lot of different genres almost competing, because there is these almost elements of farce. There is an idea in this movie that Van Damme, the leading man, he's presented as the sex object. That's not something you would normally see in a big action movie. I mean, could you imagine a movie where Arnold Schwarzenegger is just a sex object? It's just not done. So he's presented as a sex object, the object of desire. That is very unusual. And you have this buddy angle with this guy that kind of tries to take him under his wing. But really, it's just an excuse for JCVD to show off maybe some different moves than he used in his previous films, and to just try to make a fun, entertaining film. And this movie actually, to my eyes, looks like it would have cost more than it actually did. Now, the estimated budget and marketing is somewhere between $3 and $6 million total. That is a low number given how professional this production is and how good it looks. And the movie ended up grossing around 24 or 25 million worldwide at the box office. So 4 times production cost. That's a significant hit. That's how, and at the time, a young actor who is trying to reach the A-list, that's how you keep ascending. If when you make movies, they keep turning a profit. And I should have pointed out, the biggest filmmaker that Van Damme worked with in his kind of prime was a few years later in Hard Target. Now, there are plenty of people that would put that as their favorite Van Damme film, that is the highest quality movie that he made. I mean, John Woo, great filmmaker, great action filmmaker. He did Face Off in 97. Hard Target's okay. It has a few moments, and but in that movie, it didn't specifically have to be Van Damme. The one-liners in that film sound like it could have been Arnold, or it could have been Stallone. You can tell Elvis when you see him, like that kind of thing. You tell Elvis when you see him, give it a rest, pal. Say hi to Satan whatever it might be. But Lionheart, it's very entertaining. It's a fun ride, and it doesn't try to be anything other than that. They're not looking to make any larger point. They had a script, and Van Damme put forth the best effort that he could. And the fight choreography, I think, is very good. Not as good as in Sudden Death, and this is a difference between just conceptually the way that Seagal films came across in this era versus Van Damme. Now, Van Damme doesn't lose very many fights in his movies. Usually he wins pretty easily. But you get more back and forth. You get more action within fight scenes than you do in a Seagal film. Because Seagal's, the combat style that he used in the movies, usually it's one shot and the fight's over. It's one move and the guy's arm is broken and fight's over. It's the same kind of thing. Whereas you get these moments in Lionheart, and certainly you got it in Bloodsport, where you have a 5-minute scene and it's 2 guys bashing each other to hamburger. And that's kind of old school, and I like that because you can see the work that goes into that level of choreography. I didn't really have anything in particular. There's no larger meaning here. There is no point other than to entertain. But this film is an interesting, a product of its time, to see how and why Jean-Claude Van Damme, why is he important to Gen Xers and young boomers and just boomers in general? Why did he become a big deal? Because he had a certain screen presence. He was always interesting to look at, the facial expressions, the accent, and also from the kind of human perspective, the guy had a great physique, but he had a great physique that seemed like it could have theoretically been achievable for certain people without any kind of pharmaceutical enhancements. Now, if you ask me, do I think that he was taking something? He probably was taking something, even if just fat burners. But he had a physique that is a notch below, let's say, Chris Hemsworth as Thor, in my opinion. And Chris Hemsworth obviously works his tail off, and he has good genetics. But Van Damme's physique, at least in theory, you look at him today, he doesn't really look that much different. He is a little bit more weathered. He's been through a lot. He's getting up there in years. But the guy still lives the fitness lifestyle to this day. He still can do the high kick at his age. And Lionheart, you could see why it was a hit. It had good word of mouth. It opened at 7 million, which was a bit of a surprise. This was a time of year where there's not much going on at the box office. And two other films, both of which are somewhat well remembered historically. The movie Warlock, with the now unfortunately late Julian Sands, a horror film, came out the same weekend, and on the same day, Not Without My Daughter, starring Sally Field, and a pre-Dr. Octopus Alfred Molina. I actually really hate that movie. I think that movie is trash, but there are a lot of people that loved it. So an interesting window into the time, and Home Alone was still tearing up the box office, 1990. Arnold in Kindergarten Cop was still making money at the box office, January 1990. And Rob Reiner's Misery was still in the top 15, and Edward Scissorhands was for sure still in the top 10. So the fact that Lionheart cracked 7 million in its opening weekend, which give you an idea, there was good buzz, and a lot of fans of Van Damme couldn't wait to get to the cinemas to see that movie. So yeah, Lionheart, happy 35th to an okay actioner with a lot of humorous asides and a really solid movie star performance from Jean-Claude Van Damme. This has been episode 658 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all so much for spending some of your Sunday morning here with me in New York. And if you check out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Podbean, Spotify, iTunes, or the others in which we're hosted, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with a new episode real soon. Till then, peace.